This conference will now be recorded.
So thank you everyone for being here this morning. I know it's a beautiful fall day and I appreciate you all taking an hour and a half of your time to spend it here talking about short-term rentals. My name is Gail Henriksen and I'm the Community Development Director for Clatsop County. And we're hosting the first of 3 short-term rental town hall meetings today to talk about proposed revisions to our short-term rental ordinances. Before we get started, I do want to recognize that Commissioner Leanne Thompson is present in our audience today. And Commissioner Thompson, did you want to say a few words before we get started?
Well, thank you, Director Henriksen. I'll take this opportunity. So welcome, friends and neighbors. What I see that we're engaged in is a lesson in applied civics. We're looking to, folks who are not speaking need to mute their phone or mute their computers, please. I see 3 that aren't, and we're getting background. Thanks so much. Applied civics. What we're looking to do is to practice civility. We're here to do something that may be in short supply in the rest of the world, but by golly, here in our neighborhood, in our county, we are going to practice being generous, compassionate, thoughtful. We are engaged in building a good community here. And so I'm delighted to be part of that. I welcome all of you here to do that together. We are building a better, a stronger community this morning. That's what I have to say. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. And I see Commissioner Webb has also arrived. And Commissioner Webb, would you like to say a few words before we get started today?
No, thank you, Gail. I'm afraid I don't have many words left in my throat.
All right, thank you. Hopefully you'll feel better soon. And I don't see any other commissioners that have arrived right yet, so we'll go ahead and get started. Before we move into our agenda, just a few tips for anyone who's not familiar with GoToMeeting. We will have public discussion today and we will all have a chance to talk, but if you do have questions, on the top right of your GoToMeeting box, you can see circled here in yellow, there is a chat balloon, and if you click on that, you'll be able to type your question down below. Also, as Commissioner Thompson noted, when we have several people who do not have their phones or computers muted, we do get a lot of feedback. So you can mute on the computer. If you go down to the lower left hand, you'll see a little mic, and if the little line is crossed out, that means you're on mute. And if you're on the phone, if you press *6, that will also mute your phone as well and take you off of mute. So again, we just want to make sure everybody can speak and be heard today, and it just helps facilitate the meeting. So I appreciate that. So let's take a quick look about what we're going to do today. I'm going to give just a brief background about how we came to the point where we're at, talk a little bit about the framework that we're going to be working within, and that will include direction from the board, at least as understood by staff. We'll go over a little bit of the data related to today's topics, and then I would like for us to have a discussion about the changes that are currently proposed. Doesn't mean they're set in stone, but the ones that we've put out for the first go-around review. We're going to be talking about parking issues, garbage and trash issues, noise, transferability of permits, and permit costs and the length of each permit. And then to wrap up, we'll talk a little bit about our next meeting dates and the topics that we'll be covering there. So at this point, I will pause briefly. And does anyone have any questions at this point? All right, seeing or hearing none, we will move on. So just briefly, we've been having this discussion for going on 8 or 9 months now, and even longer, but of more formal discussion dating back to February of this year. We've held several work sessions with the board to talk about issues related to short-term rentals and the code enforcement process that we go through to implement the ordinance. And it was decided by the board, they directed staff to move forward with a temporary moratorium while we went through this public input and revision process to the ordinances. That moratorium was adopted on August 25th of this year, and it did go into effect on September 1st. At this point, it's scheduled to run through the end of December. The board does have the option to renew that if they so desire when we get to that point. And then to talk a little bit about the framework, and again, I will blanket this with the caveat that this is as staff has understood the board's discussion. So I think the first thing that I've understood the board to say is that they were not looking to prohibit STRs throughout the county, and that they were not at the point of the last discussion looking to grandfather out or transition out short-term rental units. So moving forward, as if we can kind of work with that within that parameter, I know many of the written comments I received today had questions and concerns about caps on units or limiting them in certain areas of the county. The board also, as I have understood it, directed staff to work to bring our two short-term rental ordinances into one ordinance. Currently, the county operates with one short-term rental ordinance just for the Arch Cape area, and another one that covers the rest of the unincorporated area and the urban growth boundary of the city of Gerhardt. As we look at the complaints and violations that we're getting, I want to point out that a lot of the things that we get complaints about in our office are things that county code compliance just does not have jurisdiction over. So we're looking at things like burn bans and open fire violations, animals, trespassing. We've had complaints about drug and alcohol violations, and believe it or not, things like public urination and masturbation. And these, again, are not things that our county code compliance staff is going to handle. These are things that are going to either be handled by another agency or law enforcement. And then there are some things that we receive complaints about that are not uniquely inherent to short-term rental units. These are things that would apply to any property within unincorporated Clatsop County, including all single-family homes, whether they're rented long-term, short-term, or lived in full-time by a family or an individual. Some of those things would include our lighting ordinance, which we don't even include in our short-term rental ordinance, noise restrictions and quiet hours, which are from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., things like solid waste accumulation. And interestingly enough, in case you didn't know this, nuclear weapons are prohibited within Clatsop County, and that is countywide. It's not just for short-term rentals. And I thought I'd just toss that out there for a bit of educational material. And then the final part of our framework that I would encourage us to work on is just work within common sense. And I'm going to use this as an example. We get a lot of complaints about solid waste accumulation. And so the picture on the left of your screen is a complaint that we received about a short-term rental unit in the city, not in the city, but in the unincorporated Warrenton area. And the ordinance does state, the short-term rental ordinance says that your trash should be in a securely secured container. And as we can see, the lid is up. There are 2 bags of trash next to the garbage can there. And so technically, yes, it is solid waste. The picture on the right is from a property down on Highway 53, which also shows solid waste accumulation. And so as we talk about common sense and keeping in mind that we have 2 code compliance officers that work for the entire unincorporated county, when we receive a solid waste accumulation complaint, we are going to balance the priority. So the complaint on the left will take a lower priority than the complaint on the right. And I know that frustrates some people because they see that they've made a complaint and maybe staff hasn't responded very quickly, or by the time we've gotten down there, the trash pickup has come and the problem's been resolved. So again, just kind of keeping in mind the capacity of what we can do and scales of priority as we move forward. I see in the chat box, Scott Harn has asked a question. Does the format of this session include responses to questions from commissioners or county staff to questions from the public, or do we just make comments with no reply? The intent is to have a discussion. I can't speak for the commissioners. In terms of staff, myself, if you have a question and I'm able to answer it, I'm happy to do that. If I don't know the answer, I will make a note of it and then get back to everyone with the answer. So I hope that answers your question, Scott.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So moving forward, just a little bit of data, and for some reason my data is not showing. But if it did, it's a really cool slide, and I think it doesn't show because I closed my spreadsheet. There are 186 short-term rental units that have been permitted in unincorporated Clatsop County. And the majority of those, there's 75 in the Arch Cape area, which is this big blue area here. There are, I forget how many, but this is Warrenton. And then and I have been corrected, in the Cove Beach area, there are 21 that are currently permitted right now. The little green area is Nehalem, and if you look on my presentation I sent out, you'll actually see the actual data in there. Okay, and then there was a lot of concern when we were discussing the moratorium that this would lead to a rush in applications. So these are the applications that we've received that are still pending. And some of these actually date back to 2019. So there wasn't the big rush that we necessarily expected. We have 4 pending applications in the Warrenton area, 1 in Cove Beach, and 6 in the Astoria area, which covers everything from Astoria out east to our eastern county boundary. So in terms of the location of complaints, if you remember from the first status slide, the biggest area with the concentration of short-term rentals is Arch Cape. They account for 13% of the complaints that we receive. Cove Beach, which has 21 rentals out of the 186, accounts for 34% of our complaints, and Warrenton accounts for 29% of the complaints. And when we talk about 71 individual complaints, some of those complaints include multiple possible violations. So someone may call in with 3 or 4 items that they believe are a violation. In total, we had 102 possible violations. Of those, the top 3 had to do with operating without a permit, noise complaints, and parking complaints. And those 3 categories total more than 50% of all the complaints that we've received. Of those other complaints that we received, 20 of them, or about 20%, were items that were outside of co-compliance jurisdiction. So whether that's driving on the beach, an animal complaint, illegal dumping on somebody else's property, those are things that we just don't have jurisdiction over with our staff. And then this last point was added this morning, but when we go out to when we go out to inspect a violation, we make notes in our short-term rental matrix, and that has been posted on our website. But we'll note if we do not see a violation, or if the violation has been resolved, or if it's not resolved, what steps were taken. And so of the 102 complaints that we've received since January 1st, 2018 through Wednesday of this week, 17 of those, it was determined that no violation had occurred. So I wanted to give us some perspective of what we're talking about and what we're looking at as we move forward, so we have an idea of the scope of the issues that we're looking at. So I'm going to stop there again and pause for questions. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
This is Alan Solaris. I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Falcon Coast showing a disproportionate number of complaints issued, and pretty sure that those complaints were concentrated from 2 or 3 people. Did you do any breakdown on the sources of complaints and the validity of those complaints, or the duplication?
Yeah, so if you go to the county's short-term rental website, and we have put that matrix up there, so there is an actual Excel spreadsheet that's been put together that lists all the complaints that we've received, what the complaints were, who made the complaints, the resolution of the complaints, and then how much staff time has been spent on that. So that document is available for download. And at the end of the presentation, I do have that on the very last slide where you can go to our website and pull all that information. That website will also include written comments that have been submitted and copies of the ordinances from Gearhart, Seaside, Manzanita, Lincoln County, and Gearhart.
Thank you.
Is that okay? You're welcome, Alan.
Quick
Okay.
question, Ms.
Yes.
Hendrickson.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, first off, thank you for assembling the presentation with the data. At this summary level, it's very helpful to understand, like you said, the scope of what you've been dealing with. And it also occurs to me that it's really revealing, because just using the numbers you provided, I could do quick back of the envelope math, and I come up with a 0.15% complaint rate in the last 2.5 years. So to me, I think that's, an interesting statistic, which means 99.85% of the time of, nights in the county, there's just no problems happening here. And if we're trying to improve it, I'd love to know, what the target for improvement is above 99.85. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. All right, so let's get to the real reason why we're here today, and that is to start talking about the revisions that will or may occur to the ordinances for the short-term rentals. So I'm going to give just a brief summary of what we have here on our parking slide, and then I really just want to open it up for discussion about the proposed recommendation. So right now, Clatsop County, in our countywide, unincorporated countywide ordinance, we require 1 off-street parking space for each approved sleeping area plus 1 extra space. People at this point, if it's a public right-of-way, we have no prohibition against parking in a public right-of-way unless that right-of-way is signed no parking. And the ordinance is very clear that it's going to be the renter who is going to be responsible for the violation, that they can be ticketed under state statute or other codes for violating a parking requirement. So staff is not necessarily proposing any changes to this requirement. We would still have to have parking spaces provided on site, and any on-street parking could not count towards your required parking. But we are recommending that because it's the renter who bears the burden of the violation, that it should be removed from the list of violations that could lead to permanent short-term rental permit revocation. And then I've included parking requirements from the cities of Cannon Beach, Gearhart, Manzanita, and Seaside, and then also Lincoln County's parking requirement. And it should be noted that Lincoln County is in a short-term rental moratorium right now and has been for about 2 years as they work through the similar process. So I will stop there and open for discussion. And I know we had several people who signed up to speak, so I will start with my list and then we'll keep moving. The first person who signed up was Charles Dice. So Charles, would you like to talk about parking?
Yes, actually I submitted a statement. It includes a bit more than parking. Rental town hall. It did.
Charles, you keep muting and unmuting.
Hopefully that'll stay unmuted. So anyway, I'd like to just read my statement because it I think addresses a number of assumptions that I'm not sure a number of us agree with respect to the process. So this was a letter in support of updates to the existing Clatsop County short-term rental ordinance. We have a grassroots organization called the North Coast Neighbors for Neighborhood organization that started in Cove Beach, but now that includes members from other areas in Clatsop County, such as Arch Cape and unincorporated Gerhardt and a few other communities. Our group includes many long-term residents of Clatsop County, folks who live in the county, work or worked in the county, spend money in the county, vote in the county, and volunteer for a number of county events and committees, as well as owners of family vacation homes in the county, owners of lots, as well as STR owners. Our group would urge the Planning Department and the Board of Commissioners to look at what other jurisdictions in Clatsop County, in neighboring coastal counties, and other counties in Oregon have done about the short-term rental problem in their communities and neighborhoods, such as Astoria, Warrenton, Gerhardt, Cannon Beach, Manzanita, Lincoln County, Bend, Newport, and many other jurisdictions in the state, as well as across the country. Each of these jurisdictions has spent many months or years holding public hearings and developing well thought out restrictions on short-term rentals that strike a balance between owners of short-term rentals and residents of residential neighborhoods. Almost all of these SDR ordinances recognize the importance of keeping residential neighborhoods truly residential and free from the commercial impact of STRs, and they also clearly identify STRs as commercial businesses, and they have crafted meaningful and effective business codes or ordinances for these businesses to regulate them just as they regulate other businesses. And I've included an excerpt from the Gerhardt STR ordinance that is typical of this recognition that STRs are commercial business ventures and the importance of maintaining the fundamental quality of life aspects of a residential neighborhood. So the quote is from section 7.010 of the Gerhardt short-term rental ordinance, and it reads, the purpose of these provisions is to control, manage, and limit vacation rentals primarily in single-family dwellings. Because of their location in residential zones, their specific characteristics and potential impacts, vacation rentals and dwellings in Gerhardt require special consideration so they properly operate with respect to the comprehensive plan and the objectives of the underlying zone regulations. So, and then there's another quote here that basically also from Gerhardt 7.020 that says vacation rental dwellings are similar to a commercial business use and therefore are not permitted use in the RA, R1, R2, and RCPD zones. And I included some other sites from Cannon Beach and Lincoln County, which I won't bother to read into the record. Some of the more common elements of these various existing ordinances that represent known best practices, and these are, as I said, these are common best practices across all of these jurisdictions. They're best practices that are fact-based, they're evidence-based, they follow the science, and they include recognition of common sense. So one of those is for neighborhoods that use septic systems to restrict maximum occupancy to the design capacity of the septic system as noted in the original DEQ approval for that septic system. Also, do not issue SDR permits to any homes that use cesspools, holding tanks, or pressurized systems. This is a real public health and safety issue that has been recognized by these other jurisdictions, and they've enacted these best practices. The second one is that for neighborhoods that have substandard streets or roads, such as Cove Beach, that do not meet county road standards, prohibit on-street parking at STRs, or limit STR occupancy to only approved on-site spaces. This is consistent with state fire codes for substandard rural residential streets or roads that are less than 20 feet wide. The third point is to define a sleeping room or bedroom consistent with already existing definitions and standards, and restrict maximum STR occupancy to 2 persons per bedroom only, but subject to any other restrictions that might arise from the septic system limit or the parking limit. The fourth one is to require external signage that's visible from the street and provides the contact information, including telephone number for the property owner or manager. Number 5 is do not allow STR permits to be transferable, which all of them have that requirement, and that's part of the I think the county's proposal as well. The sixth one is prohibit STRs in certain residential neighborhoods that are and have been dedicated solely to residential single-family homes, used in home use in relevant comprehensive plan and/or zoning ordinances. And the last one is to provide an open and transparent complaint system that allows residents to lodge complaint about STRs in their neighborhood on a 24/7 basis, that provides a timely response to these complaints measured in minutes, that permanently logs these complaints, and that also logs all of the steps taken to resolve the complaint, as well as any action taken by the county to sanction the STR owner. The system must include closing the loop with the complaining party so that they know what actions were taken and why or why not. So thank you for allowing me to submit this testimony.
Thank you, Charles. Our next person who signed up is Vivian Simon Brown.
Hello, everyone. I have a question for Gail. Like Charles, I have a letter from the Friends of Falcon Cove Beach. He was representing the neighborhoods group. Mine information doesn't cover specifically parking. It's much more context, bigger picture, more futuring. Would you like to have it now, or is there another time that would work better for you?
Vivian, I'll let you make that decision. My goal is not to censor what anybody says, as long as we're all civil. We can do it one of two ways. You can either read a letter into the record, or if you'd like, every written comment we have received is posted on our website and is part of the record, and we can handle it that way. I'll let you make the call on that one.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm sorry I can't do camera, not enough bandwidth, and I know that Commissioner Thompson is working very hard to get us more. So let me do this very quickly. While we are thinking about parking and trash and kind of the minutia of what communities deal with, let's think also about the bigger picture. How do STRs impact our economy, our society, and our environment? So has anybody thought about how many short-term rentals are really enough? How many does it take to change a neighborhood from a commercial vacation subdivision into a vacation subdivision with no locals? You know that the current ordinance doesn't limit the number of STRs. Perhaps caps might be considered. And then on the county side, what does the county lose when many short-term rental owners live out of town or out of state? Who's going to volunteer for 4-H or beach cleanups or art walks? Who's going to join the Chamber of Commerce, sit on budget committees, serve on nonprofit boards, or perhaps represent their areas as county commissioners? What does the county gain by having a large number of short-term rentals? Has the county quantified that cost of losing the local community participation? Other counties and communities around the United States have done that. I suggest we take a look at that. In the same vein, at the rural level, who's going to be there in emergencies? Who will volunteer for the local fire department or search and rescue or emergency preparedness? Who's going to serve on the road committees, the school and water boards? Who's going to be available when things go wrong? Last year when we had the big windstorm, who had the chainsaws and knew how to use them when all those trees were dropped across the access road? They also, short-term rentals, raise housing prices. Where do our teachers and business owners and professionals and service industry people work? Where do the business owners find their employees, and where do those people live? How does it change a community when people who work there can't live there? And we have a transient occupancy tax, the TOT, and we know that short-term rentals bring money in for the county. It was about $84,000 in 2019 in the Falcon Cove Beach area alone. Well, that sounds like a lot of money, but really, what kind of percentage of the total budget does that represent? Is it a drop in the bucket, or is it a significant amount? How much comes back to Falcon Cove Beach for infrastructure? And it's so easy for us to lump everybody. We really need to distinguish between the 3 or 4 short-term rental owners who participate in Falcon Cove Beach activities, those who were out there pulling the branches and who had chainsaws, and those who don't. Mom and pop short-term rental owners are significantly different than investment company people. One set are neighbors, the others are business owners. And we have, as mentioned before in some of the letters, and will also be mentioned probably in more of the testimony today, we have over 70 signatories of part-time and short-term residents who really endorse a collaborative approach in addressing 5 or 6 priorities for short-term rentals. What say do we have in our community's future and livability? Under the current ordinance, we receive notice of a short-term rental only after it's been approved. Changing to type 2 applications would allow us to say whether or not we want or need another one in our area. Think about that as changing the types. That's not addressed anywhere else as far as we know. And while sewage is not always a fun topic, consider our carrying capacity for wastewater or freshwater availability or additional visitors. Speaking for our location here at Falcon Cove Beach with Oswald West State Park on 3 sides, Cape Falcon Marine Reserve area, and the Pacific Ocean on the 4th, we have no public parking, no public facilities. Our roads are narrow, they're gravel, they're privately maintained. How many people, transient and permanent, can the Cove sustainably support? Which means that, leading to my final point, is that one size doesn't fit all. Tempting as it might be to create one set of STR guidelines for all of rural Clatsop County is simply not going to work. Clatsop Plains, for instance, has sandy soils. They have very different sewage carrying capacity than Falcon Cove Beach with our clay, silt, and sand soils. Like it or not, we do need to look at each area individually. And some areas are more suitable for STR development and others perhaps shouldn't be. Once again, though, I do want to say thank you to everyone, the people who are on this call, the people who have provided commentary on all sides, the staff and the commissioners for hard work on this really critical topic. I think all of us are willing to work together and wanting to help out in any way we possibly can. So thank you very, very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Vivian. Next is Alan Solaris.
Yeah, good morning. I'm really impressed with the work that staff is doing and putting together this data to help to inform the process. And just want to say that on the review of the latest matrix and what's proposed there, I think the responsible STR owners in Falcon Cove that I work with are pretty generally supportive of the direction and the specific changes that are being proposed. There's only a few areas that I think that I'm still concerned with. One is the change to the 2-year renewal from 5 years. Certainly support the idea that inspections should occur as often as makes sense to assure that the health and safety of the home, which is the main purpose of the inspection, is verified and is kept up to date. So not necessarily opposed to the 2 years, but it's now coming along with a $550 renewal fee. And so that's basically a 250% increase in the amount. And I think that we would all agree that it's reasonable for STR owners who derive income to have responsibility for supporting the regulatory system that you have in place. And so then the question is that fee necessary and appropriate to what it costs to run the system? And of course, as the system becomes more and more complex with the hotline, which I think is a good thing, and with attempting to respond to that, some of the requests for oversight in terms of how rapidly it's done, how complete the circle is. We just have to be realistic about what's a good use of staff time and not conflate this with other issues like a septic overflow, or which needs to be dealt with regardless of whether it's from a STR or not. Okay, the other one is transferability. There's certainly a concern of people who own a home with a permit who want to be able to sell it and give some assurance to the purchaser that they're going to be able to retain that. So the idea of having the permit be not necessarily transferable as such, but that it's subject to a reapplication by the new purchaser. I think that's fine, and that's fine as long as there aren't caps on the numbers of licenses or permits that can be issued. If there's caps, and there's no expectation that a house that's qualified in the past would continue to be eligible. Another thing is that the comments that have been made about STRs and the impact that they have. Let's take into account that in Falcon Cove, there's over 100 homes down there, close to 100. Only about 20 of those are full-time. About 20 of them, I understand today, are STRs. That leaves the remaining 60 homes, second homes or vacation homes. So if there's an area where perhaps it makes sense to allow STRs, and particularly where we have homes that are very spread out from each other in most parts of the Cove, there is a concentration at the south end, and I think that's where probably the most problems occur. But throughout the rest of the Cove, those 60 homes, those 100 homes are very spread out from each other, and very, very few of them are full-time. As far as what people who own vacation homes or short-term rentals do, I can speak for myself and the person who works with me on the Cove Beach Road Fund. I probably put in over 100 hours a year making sure that the roads down there are maintained, because they're not county roads, and they are not because the county has been unwilling to incorporate them into the county system because of the cost of maintaining them. So we have a program of funding it and voluntary contributions, which is sufficient to keep the roads really in very good shape. And if you go down there now, you'll see that they're very drivable. And let's see, so that sort of relates to parking. I think that the current regulations on parking and keeping parking contained within the property of the STRs makes perfect sense. There shouldn't be on-street parking. There are a couple of areas where people go down to the beaches to enjoy them. They're public access areas, and right around those nodes, parking can be an issue, but that's not an STR problem. Most people have the STRs are walking from the house. It's a small enough community. But I know that's something that the county is looking into, is to see if that congestion, which is really pretty minor most of the time, the vast majority of the time, if that can be improved and made safer, more convenient, so there's no interference with the roads. And the last thing would be the penalties that are currently in place. I'm glad to see that some of these areas have now been identified as not being within the jurisdiction or concern of the STR permitting system. But I would like to see you expand the range of options. First of all, to not have automatic triggers based just on the numbers of warnings or infractions, but that it be more flexible for staff to interpret, the nature of what occurred, how often it's occurred, what the response was, and even looking at the complainer. We have those high numbers because we have a couple people who have made it kind of their mission to lodge complaints, which there's would be some concern about the accuracy of those complaints, but they do generate the higher numbers. So I'd like to see you have more tools, the county have more tools in terms of the numbers of days that either probation or suspension or revocation to break it down. I think right now it's just 6 months or 1 year. There might be a 90-day one in there, but anyway, to have more periods of time. And then secondly, to use fines as a method of attempting to get compliance and prevent problems in the first place. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Leslie Smith? Okay, Leslie, it says you're muted. All right, well, Leslie works on her mic. We'll move on to Nancy Chase. Okay. Am I being heard? Can anybody hear me? Yeah, okay.
I can hear you.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can, Nancy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say I'm totally in agreement with the points that Alan made, so I won't take up time on those, but I did want to note that the right-of-way, if you look at the subdivision plats in Coat Beach, there's additional right-of-way that could be graveled, and I'm not in support of that, but it's not really a tight right-of-way. There is room for cars to park along the road, and in my experience, it's usually contractors who don't want to block people's driveways. So unlike Arch Cape, there seems to be plenty of parking here. And I really appreciate all the information that's come forward, and I'd like some time to examine it, and especially on the penalties. And again, I guess my most important thing is that we have the permits being able to be transferred. And I think you already have a procedure in your code where if you're transferring a permit, it can be re-inspected to make sure it's in compliance with everything. So I think that should handle it. And I also felt like some of the county board were in support of transferring permits. So I'm hoping they will take this into consideration. It's certainly an investment I've made to have a successful STR. And my STR has been here 30 years, long before many of the people have moved into the area. So I think short-term rentals were kind of a pre-existing condition for many of the people who are complaining now. And I think we're all, though, trying to be good neighbors and make sure that everybody's compatible. So at that, I will let you get on with the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. All right, would anyone else like to speak about parking?
Hi, Gail. This is Guido Paparoni.
Hey, Guido.
Sorry, very short. I just wanted to say I'm in support of the slide that you have in place in front of us. And I also wanted to thank you very much for this presentation. Excellent job by you and the staff. Very, very clear to follow.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other thoughts, discussion, comments about parking?
Gail, this is Jeff Davis. I'd just like to refer to the letter that we sent in that gave examples of violations of parking. I won't read the whole thing, but it's in, I believe it's posted. So there are obvious examples of not just people coming in for beach access, but STR related parking infractions. I don't know that I would agree with Nancy about the availability of on-street parking. It doesn't take much to block a road, especially for emergency vehicles. So I would recommend taking a look at that letter that we sent in that provided examples of the parking, some of which we've seen ourselves. Some was provided by other residents in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. Any other thoughts about parking before we move on? And you are always welcome to submit your comments at any time. So in case you think of something after the meeting, please feel free to email me. All right, so we will move on then. Our next topic is trash. And so as I stated earlier, the county's ordinance requires that containers be secured and that all garbage be placed in those containers. And you're not supposed to block your driveway or the access to the house. And you have to have your pickup at least one time per week. We are not recommending any changes to that requirement, but also thinking back to the pictures that we showed in terms of trash accumulation and priorities, it is important to make sure that trash is contained, and it can be a public health issue. What we're seeing typically is that the complaints we're getting are trash that has been left out either at the end of a visit or getting it in preparation of trash pickup. And so it's not an issue where we saw in the picture on the right where we had that mountain of trash that has been there for months and years and is breeding rats and other things. So we want to keep it in the ordinance, but we're recommending creating a new type of violation, which would be a Class C. Our ordinance has A, which is the highest, Class B, and then so this would be below it. We have not established a proposed fee or anything, but that would be the intent of what staff would be recommending. The other jurisdictions that we surveyed all require weekly trash pickup, at least during the time that the rental is being rented. Some of them do have requirements for wind latches. Others just say you have to show proof that you have garbage pickup at your house. So that's our recommendation. Let's open that one up for discussion. Who wants to talk trash?
So this is Charles Dice, and I live in Cove Beach, so I do have a comment. I would just like to make sure that when violations do occur, and they do occur from time to time, if the residents take pictures of the violation and submit that to the 24/7 hotline or to the county electronically, that should count as proof of a violation. The dilemma that we have seen for the last couple of years is that when we complain about something, it's almost always on the weekend because that's when the STR is full and there's 14 or 18 people there. And when they leave on Sunday afternoon, this is when the problem occurs, and there's nobody available from the county to come down and look. And by the time they get down here, you know, the trash may have been picked up or disposed of, and it's, you know, no longer a problem. And some people may say, well, fine, then the problem was resolved. Well, no, it's not fine. We have a lot of critters in Cove Beach, and the critters really like to rummage through the trash. Sometimes they'll spread it all over the neighborhood, but they certainly get used to coming back to that particular property or that particular area whenever they expect an easy meal. So it is a problem. It is a persistent problem, and it's one that I think needs to be seriously considered. Thanks.
Thank you,
This
Charles. Let's see, Nancy and then Vivian.
Yeah, Carol, I don't see a way to raise your hand if you want to comment. Is there?
We don't, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I would agree. I do think garbage is sometimes a problem for all the residents down there. You know, I think it's mainly because people forget to put out the trash. In the case of short-term rentals, you know, a housekeeper can get very busy or a renter can forget to do it before they leave. I pay extra to the garbage collection to actually come onto my property and get the can. And it's not that much. And I think it would be good for all short-term rentals to have that service so that you don't run into that problem, and just leave it up to other residents to maybe copy that example. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian?
I'd just like to add that, yes, when we have short-term rentals or anybody's trash be unsecured, we do have critters, and we've added to our usual raccoons and possums. We now have bear. And some of us are absolutely delighted to know that they are back in the area and they are using this area as a wildlife corridor, as they kind of have the right to. But it also puts them at risk if we leave trash out. So I know it sounds really weird, but let's think about the wildlife and their future as well when we think about trash. And the way the trash containers are right now, any smart raccoon can figure out how to pull that bungee cord. We've watched it. So we may want to talk with Allied Waste a little bit about is there another way of making it a little more secure, or putting them in some kind of enclosure. But I'm not an expert on trash, so somebody else will know more about it than me. But think about the critters.
Thanks, Vivian. Scott?
Thank you. It's apparent to me that a lot of this dialogue really isn't directly attached to short-term rentals. The trash issues exist for those houses that are full-time residents, as well as those that don't have a rental permit and are used occasionally by vacation homeowners. Yes, so it's a real issue, but I've personally witnessed one of these sort of examples of a can being knocked over and rifled through by a raccoon a couple of months ago. It was in front of a property that doesn't have a short-term rental permit, but I didn't take a picture of it. I'm not going to call the hotline because I'm trying not to be petty. This is an issue for the entire neighborhood and probably the other areas of the county as well, but it doesn't apply to short-term rentals. And I think you guys should, I think we should all just reflect that. We all need to be responsible, and, you know, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Any other comments, questions, thoughts about trash? Okay, so seeing none, noise. And as I stated at the beginning of my presentation, noise is one of the top 3 complaints that we get either in the office or on our short-term rental hotline. So right now, the way the ordinance is worded, it has quiet hours, which also apply throughout the county for every property, from 10 p.m. until 7 a.m. the next day. The ordinance goes on to state that it's the renter who bears the burden of the violation, and that they can be cited and issued a citation pursuant to process in our code. So staff is recommending that we continue to leave this wording that's in there, add a requirement that the quiet hours have to be prominently posted. But again, because it's the renter who bears the burden of this violation, staff is recommending that that be removed as a reason for permit revocation. Cannon Beach and Gearhart don't really address quiet hours in their ordinance at all for their short-term rentals. The ones that do have the same quiet hours, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Manzanita is a little bit more specific, and they also specify a decibel level measured at the property line. Seaside is a little more generic and just says you have to comply with the noise ordinance, but doesn't say anything more than that. So what thoughts, questions, and comments do we have about noise?
Gail, this is Beth
Yes.
Radich. Can you hear me?
I can, Beth, go ahead.
Thank you. I think it makes sense that there's some responsibility for the customer, for the renter, but it ultimately is the responsibility of the business owner. And I think it goes to a lot of enforcement topics that are, you know, I think that pertain to all of the rules and all of the enforcement is, you know, it doesn't ever affect the business owner. They're not there. So there needs to be some teeth in that they really do care and they do comply and they are held accountable when their customers don't comply. I think that's true with any business. Your customers are also your responsibility. So, and it's just availability of enforcement. I mean, you guys don't work in the evenings and weekends, and that is when the problems happen. And they happen a lot. So this has to be taken really seriously. We're not Manzanita. We're not Cannon Beach. We're not Seaside or Gearhart. We don't have any commercial zones. It's a residential neighborhood. I've had to move my child's bedroom to the other side of the house because of noise issues, and nothing's ever done. So it absolutely needs to be considered to have the responsibility also on the owner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Would anyone else like to talk about noise?
Gail, this is Guido Paparoni again, if I may.
Yes, Guido.
Yeah, so there was a comment about 55 decibels. Could you, as a comparison, could you tell us what that means? What's an equivalent sound strength or noise strength that equals 55 decibels?
So obviously I'm not a noise expert, but my general understanding is normal conversation is somewhere between 55 and 65 decibel range. So if you are at the property line and talking normally and you can still hear that at the property line, then that would be the type of noise we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. And then just like with the last slide, I think it's a good idea to make this the responsibility of the renters. There should be the ones that pay a fine. It actually makes it really straightforward for the renters to behave and not be noisy. So I'm in support of this slide as well. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Guido. Vivian?
I do think that, yes, the renters are the ones who are making noise. I also think that the short-term rental owners have a part in this, in that certain houses are known as party houses, and that word gets around and people start renting it as a party house. They continue to rent every year or every couple months. It depends on how the ad is written. if the ad is written that it is a quiet retreat in a hidden oasis, that's very different than saying, bring your, have your class reunion here, have your bachelor party here, have whatever kind of party. The ads do make a difference, and they can also change. If right now your house happens to be a party house, you can change that gradually over time by changing your advertising. It really does make a difference. And I do believe that as long as advertising is advocating partying, then that is the short-term rental owner's problem.
Thank you, Vivian. Joanne? Joanne Cornelius, did you want to speak? No, guess not. Okay, let's see. So we do have a comment in the chat box. This is Dr. Claire Hassler-Lewis. The question to the group is basically relating to homeowners associations. And so the property where the, Dr. Hassler-Lewis lives is in Surf Pines. And the association was formed in 1969. They have their own CCRs and bylaws. The question is, can Surf Pines HOA establish its own rules on short-term rentals? For example, cap them or phase them out altogether pursuant to certain requirements? And the answer to that is yes. So what would happen is we as the county will not enforce your rules as a homeowners association. If someone were to come in with a permit that meets our requirements, we will issue the permit. But what we would also want to see then is, some sort of documentation from the homeowners association that they would be in compliance with your rules as well. If they don't produce that, they're not required to, we will still issue the permit if they meet ours. But then on your homeowners association side of things, you then would have the ability to go after the property owner as your association for violation of your rules. Does that answer your question?
Gail?
Yes.
Yes, it does. In part, I just want to be clear. So if we decide to cap STRs or in fact get rid of them altogether, we can do that regardless of what Clatsop County decides to do with STRs.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just to be clear, it will be your HOA that will do that enforcement. It will not be the county. So,
Of course. Yep.
okay.
Understood. Thanks so much. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Yep. Okay.
Gail?
Yes. Charles?
Charles, yeah. So on the issue of noise, I would like to point out that the noise that's occurring in many of the short-term rentals, not all of them, but many of them are because the short-term rental is there and because the business owner has advertised it as a short-term rental, and there's anywhere from 8 to 14 or 16 people there, and they're all paying a great deal of money to stay there for 3 days or a week or whatever it is, and they do make noise, and when they make noise, that impacts the resident, and it impacts them right then and there. And it could be at 10 o'clock at night or midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. And if somebody files a complaint, nothing's going to be done about it until obviously the short-term renters are long gone. So there really is, I don't really see any teeth in trying to hold the renters responsible. I see a lot more ability to get effective action taken by making it the responsibility of the business owner who has brought all these people into the neighborhood in the first place. And it should be their responsibility to notify their tenants about the noise and to enforce it on their own. And if that means they need to hire, a local enforcement person for the STR community or something that can drive around the neighborhood every night, then that's what they need to do. Or increase the fees enough so that the county sheriff can park somebody down there 24/7 on the weekends. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but not holding the business owner responsible for the problems that they're creating with their business, that is not the solution.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Joanne Cornelius, I see you are unmuted again. Would you like to speak? Okay. All right. I don't hear anything from Joanne. Nancy?
Yeah, I'd just like to note, I have a small house, and last thing I want is to have a party in it. And I think most owners feel the same way, most STR owners. I'm down the Cove a lot, and the only noise problem I've ever had is with a long-term resident's dog who's being very protective of the owners and is barking a lot. So I just modify my walk so the dog's not on alert anymore. And I just wish we could all handle this in another way. If my tenants have made noise and it's verified, I know who they were and I can reach them and give that information so they can be fined. So, and they certainly will put in their review of my place that it's not a place for a party. So everyone's always very eager to post reviews of the pros and cons of a location. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Anyone else who would like to add some comments or have questions about the noise requirements? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to transferability of permits. So under the county's ordinance right now, permits are able to be transferred at any time to anyone for any reason. You basically pay your transfer fee, and as long as there have not been any changes to the building, you're not required to have a reinspection, and so you just pay your fee and the permit's transferred. This direction staff understood from the board. There were two discussions about transferability. One was generally long-term overall, which staff understood that the board did not necessarily support the continued transfer of permits. There was also a discussion of transfer of permits when we were looking at the moratorium, and the board did agree that during the moratorium, permits could continue to be transferred. So that's my understanding of what the discussion has been. Most of the other jurisdictions that we surveyed do not allow permits to be transferred. That's true across the board in Cannon Beach, also in Seaside. Manzanita and Gearhart do allow permits to be transferred, not with the sale of a property, but via inheritance. And then for Lincoln County, I could not find anything in their ordinance that addressed transferability of permits, but I may have missed it. So our recommendation, based on what we understand the board direction to be, would be to prohibit future transfer of permits as we move forward with our revisions. And I know that Mr. Solaris has already talked about this a bit. Does anyone have thoughts or comments about this particular issue? Charles.
Yeah, I just like to say that we're in full support of that. I mean, again, I think the county here has done a really great job of looking at what all the other jurisdictions have done. They've all put a lot of work into their own ordinances. They've all come to the same conclusion, essentially, to not allow transferability of permits. There were really good reasons for that. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Charles. Vivian?
I concur. One of
Okay.
the main things for affordable housing is that prices are reasonable, and that if you are going to be transferring a short-term rental permit, that raises the price often very much beyond the reach of the people that we want to have living here full-time. So full-time and working in the community. So it really does make a difference on the price. And I believe that most of us would prefer to have each new owner have an opportunity to prove that they are worthy of being short-term rental owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Hi, Gail.
Any
This
other?
is Guido.
Yeah, Guido, go ahead.
May I ask another question, please?
Sure.
So let's assume I was the owner of a short-term rental and I wanted to sell my property. So what would the procedure be so that the buyer of my STR rental has the ability to go through this process? Does it happen in advance of the property being sold, or does it happen after the property is sold?
It would happen after the property is sold because we would need the owner of the property to sign the permit application. And then that permit is issued to the owner of the property.
Okay, so the permit is canceled, if you will, when the property is sold, and then there's an inspection, and at that point in time, it can be put back as an STR. Is that correct? If it passes?
Right. So the new owner would come in just as the original owner did, or the previous owner would have done. They'll pay their whatever fee we end up with. They will get an inspection by building codes. They will need to have sign off from environmental health for the septic system, or if they're in an area where there is sewer, from the sewer district. And then they would get issued a new permit, just like everybody did 3 years ago when we started this program.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much, Gail.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts about transferability?
Yes.
Rick?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I would just like to either ask a question or state, as far as completing, the inspections when a new permit is issued for health and safety regulations, I'd like to recommend that you also consider the history of complaints for that home to be taken into consideration in the evaluation of the new permit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I have some comments in the comment box. Let me read those. Kathy Grew says, I completely agree that the owner needs to be responsible, and I'm assuming this is going back to our noise discussion. The renters may change too frequently to police each one. Also, her vote is to not allow transferability. Carolyn Crawford has written that conversely, this takes from resale value, and this is in regard to transferability. And she also says that I agree that any new owner needs to be re-inspected and in compliance. Okay. Do we have any other persons who would like to comment on transferability? Nancy?
Yeah, I just feel like if my daughter inherits it, that I can see that some of the jurisdictions allow that through inheritance. And I do, I disagree with not being able to transfer it, but worst case, I would like my daughter to be able to have the STR permit and also honor the reservations that had already been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, so we are at 11:14. I believe that we have one more set of comments to go through, or topics to go through, and that's permit cost and length of permit. And right now our permits are $550, which is good for a 5-year period. Before the current ordinance was approved and it was only permitted in Arch Cape, the fee was, I believe, $150 or $125, and it was paid annually. And you paid on top of that your inspector to come and do your inspection. So we are proposing to keep the $550 fee, but to decrease the length of the permit from 5 years to 2 years, which would in effect make your permit fee, and I'm going to do the math wrong, $275 per year. Cannon Beach charges $606 plus a $75 business license fee. Their permits, unless you have a lifetime limited permit or a 5-year permit that gets phased out, their annual permit, their permits are issued once a year as well. Gearhart has a $725 application fee plus an inspection fee of $125. You can get $100 of that refunded if you do have a go bag in your short-term rental. Lincoln County charges $350 for the new application and then $125 per renewal, and that's an annual fee. Manzanita, $75 for the initial application fee, and then after that it's a $250 annual license fee. And Seaside was the most expensive, and they have several fees ranging anywhere from the initial $20 filing fee. They have an annual business fee based on number of occupants from anywhere from $475 up to $550 per year. And then with your initial approval, depending on whether you have to just go through the planning department or you have to go up to the planning commission for your approval, there are additional fees for that as well. So our $275 fee, which is basically what it would come out to annually for a 2-year permit, is basically in line with the fees and lower than some, higher than others, but not by much. So we are recommending the $550 2-year term. And I know we've had some comment on this earlier in the meeting, but does anyone have anything else they'd like to add in terms of permit cost or permit length? Charles?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what was said earlier by someone, I can't remember exactly who, that there probably should be some correlation between the cost of enforcement, especially thinking about the ability of the code compliance people to be more responsive, given that all of the many of the violations occur on the weekend. So there may be a need to have you know, a code enforcement person that has a shift on the weekend or something. But whatever those costs are, there should be some correlation between covering all of those costs and how much you collect in fees, so that the taxpayer doesn't end up having to pay for any of this stuff. You know, the business, it's a business, subject to business regulations, and the businesses should carry the cost of the compliance and the enforcement piece, as well as the administration. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Nancy?
Yeah, I'd just like to, you know, if this is to cover costs for staff, I think that's totally warranted. But I think the first time when my STR got its first permit, I had to put in new windows and get the fire extinguisher relocated and a number of other items that required the building inspector to come back. And I would think now, obviously my windows are there, my parking's there, and I think the cost will be much less. So I'm hoping that if this happens, that the fees will be tracked just to make sure they do cover costs and aren't in excess.
Thank you, Nancy. All right. Any other thoughts from anyone on cost or permit length?
I forgot one item.
Yeah.
Gail, could you clarify? Currently, if I went in for my permit, I would have to get the septic evaluated, which really, I think DEQ says only needs to happen every 4 to 5 years. So is that being waived on the 2-year, every other 2-year cycle, or how are you looking at that?
Yeah, I actually have been discussing this with environmental health, and response I had this morning was household septic tanks are typically pumped every 3 to 5 years. The person responding from environmental health said she did not see the need to have a system evaluation report every 2 years, but with every other renewal, so basically every 4 years.
Great, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, any other thoughts about cost or length of permit? Okay, so we will move on. We are about at the end of our meeting today. As I've stated a couple times, we did receive written comments from Beth Radich, Carol Harn, Jeff and Denise Davis, Joanne Cornelius, North Coast Neighbors for Neighborhoods, Oregon Coast Alliance, Susan Paduano, and the short-term rental owners. And all of those comments are posted on the county's website. You can see the meeting, the meeting link, the webpage below. And I think I've included that in several of my emails. Our next 2 meetings, we're going to have one on November 12th, again at 10 a.m., and that will be a Friday. And these are both virtual meetings. Our topics at that meeting, so you can start thinking about these items, will include how we determine occupancy in the unit, looking at the length of stay. And what that means is right now our 2 ordinances, Arch Cape and the rest of the county, have different ways of calculating length of stay. The countywide ordinance doesn't have any limitations or regulations. So if I'm a short-term rental owner, I can rent out the short-term rental unit every day of the year to 365 people, different people throughout the year. In Arch Cape, it's a little different. It's a little bit more nuanced. It's basically, I think you can rent it 7 days. I'm going to say this wrong. 7 days out of a 14-day period. But don't quote me on that. It's a little bit more subtle. We're also going to be talking about violations and penalties and how we work with unsubstantiated complaints or complaints that come in where we find no violation. And then in January of next year, which is hard to believe, but we're looking at 2022 already, we're going to be talking about the local representative or local contact regulations in our ordinance. We'll talk about the notification requirements for the neighborhood. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not short-term rentals should be called out specifically in our zoning code or in certain zoning districts. So that will be a very complicated topic, and it can be very controversial, but we do need to talk about it. So we'll be looking at that on January 22nd. And with that, I will stop talking and open it up for any final questions or comments or thoughts.
Gail, this is Guido Paparoni.
Yep, go ahead.
I just want to commend you, the staff, the Board of Commissioners, and the public. What a fantastic session this was. I mean, you've set the bar super high. I wish this format could be exported to many other things we do for our community. So kudos to you for how professional and how open you were. There were no time constraints. Everybody got heard. Questions were answered. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Before I go back to the commissioners, and Jeff, I see that you want to speak as well. Just want to read, Jeff did say that he supported the prohibition against transferability, and Elise Shoup has said she agrees that transferability should not be automatic. Being an STR owner is basically a contract between the owner and the county. Conversely, if one owner lost their license due to multiple infractions, should the next owner be automatically banned from ever getting a permit? Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks, Gail. I'd like to second Mr. Properoni's praise of your process here. I think it's a great opportunity. I just, in closing, I just wanted to revisit the question of a cap on the number of STRs. I wanted to talk about the length of time, but I think we're going to talk about that in November. Scott's comment about the only having one, I think it was 1.5% complaints. My feeling is it doesn't really address the idea of quality of life for residents. Even if it's 1.5%, we're the ones who experience the abuses. Alan's comment about the availability of more STRs in, I'm sorry, I forgot to say we're in Cove Beach also, raises the whole question of, how much is too much? And I've said this before, I think it's important to ask the question, if you, in your primary neighborhood, would you want 30, 40, 50% of the homes in your neighborhood to be STRs? I think that's an important question for anybody dealing with these issues. So thank you very much. We'll see you in November.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Scott?
Thank you. I think I'm totally sensitive to that that point, and I agree. But what I observe is that the issues that we're discussing in this exercise are issues that we all encounter, even from our neighbors that are not short-term renters. So I care very much about the quality of the neighborhood experience here in the Cove, and we encourage and have had great success with our guests being considerate. But I would tell you that at my primary residence, which is an area that's comprised of no short-term renters, all of the issues that we're discussing here today, from trash to parking and certainly noise, I experience, and I experience them at a far greater rate than the 0.15% that we're noticing here. And I would tell you that if all of the homes in the Cove were fully occupied year-round, that all of the things that we're talking about, all of the issues would be much worse than they are now with the high vacancies that we have. Thank you.
And thank you, Scott. Elise, and then Todd Lundy.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. I guess I just want to bring up one point, which I also put in writing, but too late. And that's that the whole system of talking about noise and parking and lights and all these other issues, it falls upon the residents who are there. And when I go to the beach, I'm not a full-time resident, but I really don't like to spend my time complaining about the short-term rentals or taking pictures of their garbage, which I've done. And it falls disproportionately upon the people who are permanent residents and want to make this their home. And then they are villainized. And I think that's totally unfair. I don't know. I wish there was some other way. I really like the idea of you putting in the hotline, and I appreciate that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Todd?
Hi, Gail. This has been a great session for bringing up a lot of good issues, almost all of them from Cove Beach. And I'm concerned only that while they're to be commended for participating, we ought to really get a broader participation in the county, since this applies to the whole county. And I'm concerned that we're only hearing from one corner of the county. How can we broaden the participation in these meetings?
That's a very good question, Todd. We do send the notices out. They go to all of the Board of Commissioners and our Planning Commission. And then we have a list of people who have signed up because of their interest in short-term rentals. And we did do our quarterly meetings in both Cove Beach, Arch Cape, and then we expanded out to the Clatsop Plains area. But I think what we're seeing is the areas where the biggest concern is, where people, I guess, are most passionate about the issue, is really the southwest corner of the county. And, we can certainly do more, probably expand our mailing lists and maybe send it out to our planning area advisory committees and those public lists where people have signed up for notifications, and send it out to all of them as well. But we just don't see the level of short-term rentals and the interest like we do in Southwest County. It's just not the hot button issue.
Thanks, Gail.
Hey, you're welcome. Nancy?
Yeah, Gail, is it sent to all short-term rental owners or managers?
No, we have not put that list together, and that's a good suggestion. So I will do that for our next meeting. But it's mainly been people who have just, we've collected names over the past year and a half or so that we've put this kind of internal list together.
Thank you. I think assessment taxation, at least they have my email. So, when they collect the fees. So it might be already existing list that you can use.
Okay, good note on that. Okay, before we wrap up, I'm going to turn it back over to Commissioner Thompson and Commissioner Webb in case they have it. Yes, Charles?
So picking up on that comment from Nancy, I noticed that we have a representative from the press who joined the meeting. I don't know if he's still on or stayed on, but it seems to me like this would be a terrific public service that our media folks could provide by getting this word out and spread out through the county. Just a comment.
And a good one, Charles. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Commissioner Thompson and Commissioner Webb for final remarks, and then we are free to roam about the beach.
On that happy note, I just want to say thank you, friends and neighbors. Well done. Let's carry forward in the same spirit. Take care.
My closing note would be that the board is very interested in a county-wide approach to STRs, but we have to recognize the vast differences in the distribution of STRs and also in the local neighborhoods and circumstances. So please don't think that we will only be taking a look at the southwest corner. We'll be looking countywide with these rules. And thank you all so much for your participation. This has been really informative.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, everyone. I will see you in November.